It's that time again. Now, those of you who remember, longtime viewers and possible America's high school students, you may remember that last year I, around this time, did a video about the Academy Award nominations for Best Picture and also talked about what happened at the show. I really enjoyed making that video. It was honestly a really fun exercise in tackling a large number of reviews in such a short amount of time. And this year, I kind of wanted to do the same. Besides, I haven't gotten around to doing any reviews on the Best Picture nominees. I was going to do one on The Shape of Water, but I didn't have the equipment. So without further ado, here's my reviews of the nominees for Best Picture. It's hard to talk about a Guillermo Del Toro movie without using the words beautiful and gorgeous, so I'm going to try and refrain from saying those words. Okay. Oh, I gotta say, out of the nominees, The Shape of Water is one of the most beautiful films of the year. It's hard not to fall in love with a Guillermo Del Toro movie. The cinematography by Dan Lauston glides along with a fairy tale-like wonder, much like Pan's Labyrinth. The score by Alexandre Desplat feels like you've stepped into a dream, and the acting all across the board is amazing. Michael Shannon's character Strickland plays out like the physical embodiment of male ideals of the time, and of course, delightfully plays a villain almost too well at this point. Octavia Spencer is of course really great, adding much of the film's comedic relief, but the standouts of the film are Sally Hawkins as Eliza and Doug Jones as the asset. It's a very tough tightrope to walk, making us really believe that these two characters can be in love, but the emotional performances really help sell that relationship, especially Sally Hawkins, who manages to make you feel so much about her character without her saying a single word, for the most part. There's so much I wish I could say, but it's honestly one of the best films of the year. I think I'm getting soft with this rating in particular, and more than earns a 10 out of 10. It's my absolute favorite of the nominees, with an ending that just leaves me with a really warm feeling in my heart every time I watch it. A movie that came seemingly right out of nowhere, Get Out not only feels like a breath of fresh air among the films nominated for Best Picture, but also in the genre that it finds its roots in. The screenplay is very well written, with brisk pacing that makes the hour and 40-minute runtime just fly by. But hands down, the two best things in the movie are the inventive set pieces that Jordan Peele comes up with. That's sure to... The sinking place in particular is a hauntingly beautiful visual that's sure to stick in people's minds for years to come. And Daniel Kaluuya's star-making performance as Chris, who hooks you in with every scene and shows surprising range in a film of this nature. Even the sidekick character, Rod, who in lesser hands would have been very annoying, is one of the best characters in the film. If there's one thing that can be picked apart, it's the fact that Jordan Peele's still a little green around the gills when it comes to directing, and some shots, I'll admit, are kind of staged really oddly or could have been handled a little bit better. The cinematography ranges from really good to And while I'm not gonna lie, a small part of me really enjoys the alternate ending slightly more, ending in an almost Coen Brothers-esque tone. The movie is still one of the more entertaining nominees and has one of the most satisfying conclusions in a film last year. It's endlessly rewatchable and it more than earns a 9 out of 10. Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri plays like a long-lost Coen Brothers movie, with absolutely amazing performances from everyone all across the board. Frances McDormand is the one to beat, with an absolutely emotional performance that drives everyone around her. On top of that, it's just really nice to see Sam Rockwell back in the spotlight again. It's been too long. But the biggest draw is the script, which boasts some of the sharpest dialogue this year, as is to be expected from Martin McDonagh. Some things that do hold the movie back is the cinematography, which, while okay, doesn't really stand out compared to the rest. And not only that, but the subject material, I imagine, can be a lot for people, and the ending is sure to leave a lot of people divisive. My biggest issue has to be that most characters honestly do feel kind of wasted. Almost as if more scenes were cut out featuring them, like Mac's mom from Sunny in Philadelphia and Mildred Hayes' ex-husband. Even still, it's a great watch, and it's just great to have Martin McDonagh back behind the camera. Even if this isn't my favorite of his 3 movies, it's still 7 Psychopaths. It's a 9 out of 10. I did not expect Paul Thomas Anderson to make a film about dressmaking so goddamn compelling. I'm gonna admit, when I walked out of Phantom Thread the first time in theaters, I really had a lot of things going on in my head, and I really needed to see it again. This felt like a movie that I knew I needed to see again to form complete thoughts on it. I could safely say now that it's another knockout from Paul Thomas Anderson, with probably Johnny Greenwood's best score to date. In a perfect world, he would have won for Best Original Score, as well as for the film doing for Vicky Krieps what Get Out did for Daniel Kaluuya, who, if I'm being honest, danced circles around Daniel Day-Lewis. But the best thing about the movie is the relationship between Reynolds and Alma, which is honestly so fascinating that when rewatching it multiple times, you see everything in a different perspective throughout. It's well warranted for further examination, and I can see myself rewatching it again and again and finding something new to talk about. The few flaws I do have with the movie are the pacing, as the editing doesn't feel as tight as Anderson's other movies, even Inherent Vice. But even then, the intentionally slow pacing adds up to the tension and makes certain scenes feel absolutely gripping to watch, like Reynolds and Alma arguing over dinner. Not only that, but the camera work initially didn't seem promising, mostly due to the fact that Paul Thomas Anderson mostly served as his own DP. But after a while, it started to grow on me, and there were some absolutely stunning shots later on. And finally, I never thought I'd say this, but Daniel Day-Lewis, while doing a great job as Reynolds Woodcock, this character doesn't really stand out as one of his best performances in his wide career. I will say, out of all the Oscar nominees, this is the one that I think about the most and has stayed with my mind ever since I saw it. It's an 8 out of 10, and it absolutely deserves your attention. Please watch it if you can. Dunkirk is a movie that has a lot going for it. From an action standpoint, it's almost unparalleled, with some of the most jaw-dropping set pieces I've ever seen in a World War II film. Nolan's acute attention to detail and willingness to use practical effects above all else is on full display here, and does leave you on the edge of your seat in a few moments, especially whenever there's a scene underwater. But other than that, there's really not much else I can think of about the film, and on top of that, it doesn't really hold up in repeat viewings. Well, I love that Nolan doesn't do cold, calculating dialogue like he always does where the characters sound like robots. It's like he did another extreme, and as a result, you don't really care for anyone in the film or even know who any of the characters are. On top of that, I may get some flack for this, but I just don't really feel Hans Zimmer's score here. The repetition of the ticking clock and droning noises just really don't hold up well isolated, nor do I feel like it adds. It's a 7 out of 10. It's pretty good, but it doesn't really hold up well for me. Lady Bird is a fine movie. It's not really my favorite of the Oscar nominees. It's very middle ground, but it's a very nice movie for the most part. A part of me really appreciates Greta Gerwig's first feature film, which really does bring to mind movies from her peers like Noah Baumbach. But not only that, but Laurie Metcalf's performance is spectacular and features one of the best mother-daughter relationships I've ever seen in a film. But the main thing that holds this movie back is honestly something that, it really has no control over, and that's that we've seen almost everything we can see of a movie in this genre a million times before. The story of Lady Bird and the fallout with her friend, the douchey boyfriend, the popular kids, even to an extent Lady Bird in school all felt too familiar and didn't really stand out compared to other movies in the genre, and at times I feel like I've seen this movie done a few times better. Though, in fairness, the coming-of-age subgenre is very hard to stand out from. But I will say the ending is one of the biggest standouts of the year and features one of the best tributes to a city I've ever seen since Woody Allen's Manhattan. It's a 7 out of 10. It's really enjoyable. This is a movie that's very hard for me to talk about because while there's a lot going on in this movie that I really liked, it just really didn't click for me. I tried watching it 3 times, and I still felt this way. Timothée Chalamet's chemistry with Armie Hammer was really great, and the relationship is very touching and moving. On top of that, there's some beautiful imagery in the film, at times reminding me of Master of None Season 2. And the final monologue by Michael Stuhlbarg was very touching. Although I did feel that I kind of heard it before.
But to make yourself feel nothing, so as not to feel anything. What a waste.
Don't you see, this is the good part. This is what you've been digging for all this time. Now you finally have it in your hand, this sweet nugget of love. Sweet, sad love. And you want to throw it away. You've got it all wrong.
But I gotta tell you, the biggest problem with this movie for me is that it is slow. The first act in particular drags the most, and the second act feels the same until it starts to gain momentum right after they kiss. And while the film does look gorgeous, we linger on the locations for so long that it just distracts at a certain point. On top of that, I never really cared for the other characters in this movie. I felt like we could have seen a little bit more of them, especially Marzia. But even still, I really loved the third act, and the ending is so amazing. That final shot just haunts you after the movie's over. But I just couldn't click with this film. There's definitely some good to be had, but the slow pacing and weak characters just killed it for me. It's a 6 out of 10, but it's still a very enthusiastic 6 out of 10. It's a Steven Spielberg Oscar-nominated film that's based on a true story that follows a huge cultural moment in American history. It's kind of what you expect at this point, really. I'll admit, I was really skeptical about the movie with the rushed shooting schedule that I heard about and the fact that it was made in pretty much under a year in order to make Oscar deadline. But I have to admit, it's a fine movie. Janusz Kaminski's cinematography isn't entirely on the top of its game as it usually is, but the grounded story doesn't really ask for something along the lines of Catch Me If You Can or Schindler's List. Bob Odenkirk was really great, and it's nice to see him outside of Better Call Saul. But I have to admit, Meryl Streep wasn't a standout at all. The scene in Vietnam feels very lazy for Spielberg, which kind of shocks me. And the ending is one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen in a film. It acts less like a film ending and more like a cliffhanger for like a Ryan Murphy FX series. It's really jarring. In all honesty, if it wasn't for the fact that it's Steven Spielberg, this probably would have been a lot worse off. Because even though it's kind of Oscar baity, he still finds a way to make people talking and looking at paper feel cinematic. And that's still pretty admirable. It's a 6 out of 10, a good one-and-done type movie, really. Besides, it could have been a lot worse. I mean, it could have been... Out of all the Oscar nominees for Best Picture, this one is my least favorite. And if we're being honest, it's kind of boring, really. But there are some good spots, really. For one thing, Bruno Del Bonel's cinematography is always amazing to look at. I expect nothing less from the guy who made Inside Llewyn Davis look beautiful and also made the worst Harry Potter movie the best looking. Don't at me. And secondly, there's Gary Oldman's acting. Although, I think it may just be me, but whenever he talks as Churchill, I can't help but think of Victor Reznor from Call of Duty.
When will the lesson be learned? You cannot reason with a tiger when your head is in its mouth! We will be free or die trying!
It's sort of like,
There! On the ledge! Shoot him! The tag under the ground!
But out of all my criticisms, the one big criticism that I have for Darkest Hour is something that's honestly really beyond its control, and that's the fact that Dunkirk came out in the same year. And after seeing the jaw-dropping action of Dunkirk, it really makes all the talking behind the scenes just feel really boring in comparison. Not only that, but everybody in Winston Churchill's cabinet just act less like characters and more like stock Robin Williams movie villains. And their criticisms of Winston Churchill don't really resonate as a result, and it just feels more like, I disagree with you, and you should feel bad. The movie's really nothing special, and outside of two scenes in particular, the scene about the tiger and the scene in the subway, it really isn't anything special, and I personally would have replaced this movie in the running for The Florida Project or Blade Runner 2049. It's a 5 out of 10. It's pretty mediocre. But I will admit, It's at least better than Joe Wright's last movie. So those were all the Best Picture nominees, and there were some great picks and there were some picks. Overall, it was a pretty good year. Even the worst movies nominated at least had something going for it. But that's not what anybody cares about. Everybody wants to know who won the big award of the night. Who won Best Picture?
And the Oscar goes to... The Shape of Water.
I'm gonna admit, I didn't get to see the whole award ceremony from beginning to end. I know I missed out on Jimmy Kimmel's opening monologue, and from the sounds of it, I really didn't miss much in particular. And I also missed Sam Rockwell's acceptance speech, but I did get to see that later on. That was very touching.
Run that clock, Jimmy. I want to get that ski jet or whatever that was. When I was 8 years old, I was called into the principal's office, and my father was looking very solemn. And he said, "We got to go. It's Grandma." And we got in the car, and I said, "What's wrong with Grandma?" And he said, "Nothing. We're going to the movies."
I was very happy for Sam Rockwell to win. It was so satisfying to see Roger Deakins finally get his due for arguably his most beautiful movie to date. And I was very happy for Jordan Peele to win for Get Out. I did not expect him to win anything at all, or Get Out to win anything at all. But his speech in particular really resonated. And on top of that, it was very well deserved. Get Out was one of the best written movies of the year.
I stopped writing this movie about 20 times because I thought it was impossible. I thought it wasn't going to work. I thought no one would ever make this movie. But I kept coming back to it because I knew if someone let me make this movie, that people would hear it and people would see it. So I want to dedicate this to all the people who raised my voice and let me make this movie.
But of all the wins, I was the most happy for Guillermo Del Toro winning Best Director and Best Picture. Following his Oscar win, I took to Facebook and I wrote a little bit something about Guillermo Del Toro, and I wanted to share it with you guys. So without further ado, this is going to turn into a little bit of a congratulatory thing, but I feel it's very important, and it's something I really want to share with you guys. As a Latino man, I never really felt connected with my heritage, despite having 3 amazing siblings that have supported me through thick and thin in Mexico. I view that in part with my upbringing, as my parents never really got me to be in touch with that part of me. Growing up, when I would think about the movies and wanting to be in the movies, it was almost always through an acting perspective, through the eyes of Jim Carrey, Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill, Jackie Chan, very physical actors. And it wasn't until I was 12 years old that I saw Pulp Fiction for the first time, and it really inspired me to be a writer and a director. I would see the writers and actors and directors that I admire: Tarantino, the Coens, Frank Capra, F.W. Murnau, Steven Spielberg, Rian Johnson, etc. And I would want to be them so badly. But one man in particular made me believe that I wouldn't be them, but that I would be one of them. Guillermo Del Toro, with his iconic visual style, his effortless artistic genius, and lovable personality and characters, has found his way into my heart in recent years. From childhood, he was always a big part of my movie watching life, as I always used to rewatch Blade 2 on my VHS tape and look on in awe of everything I was seeing. Not just because I wanted to be Blade as a child, but that's beside the point. As I got older, I discovered the Hellboy movies through my aunt and loved everything from the always impressive Ron Perlman to the gorgeous art style in the film. But believe it or not, it wasn't until Pacific Rim that I was introduced to what kind of an artist Del Toro was. As much as I love that film, I owe a lot of my drive to his commentary track in the film. Hearing him talk about all the details and symbolism he infused in a simple action blockbuster was eye-opening. At that point, I sought out his entire body of work, and then came along Pan's Labyrinth, a movie that is so beautiful So artistically inspiring and so brutal, every time I watch it, it feels as though I see it for the first time. Kronos and The Devil's Backbone are magnificent pieces of work also, and any normal director would feel fortunate to have made at least one of those in their lifetime. But the fact that Del Toro has been able to make consistent adult fairy tales throughout his career, it really makes me feel connected to the childhood I once felt with stories I grew up reading and watching, like Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan, and other Disney movies, while also helping me see another side of the world that I never found myself connected to. Then there's The Shape of Water, one of the most beautiful films of the year. It's not my absolute favorite. It ranks third in my top 10 of the year, right behind Baby Driver and The Last Jedi. But it's one of the most important films I've ever seen. Having never seen one of Del Toro's films in theaters, walking out of The Shape of Water left me with one of the most joyful and happiest feelings I've ever experienced when going to the movies. A Beauty and the Beast for the modern era. How Sally Hawkins' beautiful performance meshed so well with the chemistry with co-star Doug Jones, who was in a rubber suit the whole time, and the fantastic look of the movie that only Guillermo could have brought to the screen. I felt like I was watching a masterpiece in the making, a feeling that wouldn't be felt until I saw Blade Runner 2049 for the first time. And seeing how everyone else responded to seeing Del Toro's creative vision brought to the screen, it warmed the heart and it was very inspiring. Like I said, I've never really felt connected to my Latino heritage, but on March 4th, Guillermo Del Toro finally got his due. When he dedicated the award to young filmmakers all over the world, it felt like he was speaking to me in my cynical mind. Thank you, Guillermo Del Toro, and I hope that you continue to inspire and create beautiful worlds and rich characters that inspire everyone all over the world. You make me feel prideful for being a Latino man and have shown me that dreams are most definitely possible, no matter who or what you are. And his last words are going to resonate with me for days to come.
I was a kid enamored with movies. Growing up in Mexico, I thought this could never happen. It happens. And I want to tell you, everyone that is dreaming of a parable, of using genre fantasy to tell the stories about the things that are real in the world today, you can do it. This is a door. Kick it open and come in. Thank you very much.
That's my Oscar video. I am very sorry that it got emotional towards the end. I'm Joshua Lozano. If you can, like, favorite, share, comment, subscribe. Let's talk about the Oscar nominees this year, the winners, the losers. What did you think? Personally, for me, it was such a robbery that Baby Driver didn't win Best Editing when it's the star of the fucking movie. Anyway, that's all. I'm Joshua Lozano, and I'll see you guys next time. There's definitely going to be a little bit of a break in between this video and the next, so I just wanted to take a little bit of a breather. Catch you guys later.